Okay, we're looking at logic game 4, and this is LSAT 41. 8 people are sitting evenly spaced around a circular picnic table. Any 2 of them are said to be sitting directly across from one another if and only if there are exactly 3 other people sitting between them, counting in either direction around the table. The following conditions apply. F sits directly across from G. H sits immediately next to neither F nor K. I sits immediately next to and immediately clockwise from O. So you have O and I is clockwise from O. So it's like O is in 2 o'clock, for example, and I is in 3 o'clock. So I've shown it like that. Okay, we are obviously dealing with a circular game here, and it could be solved in a sequential fashion. The only difference between a sequence game and a circular game is that the 8th variable and the first variable sit next to one another. The 8th variable and the second variable have one space in between them, and so on and so forth. I find those types of solutions extremely difficult to deal with because of the nature of the questions that are asked. So I always set up circular games like this. I've seen 3 of them now. One of them had 6 spots. The last 2, including this one, have had 8 spots, and so I've just created an asterisk, and that gives us 8 spots around there, around the table. We're going to solve the scenarios in this game. I've already created our little setups just to make it look good. I can't draw them that well in an efficient manner. On a testing booklet, I could do it pretty quickly. Okay. So we're looking to apply the first order rule that we have, and that's this. F sits directly across from G. So I'm going to place G and F like this. Okay, and that's all that F and G can do. You make an error in complexity if you try to move F around the table to 7 different places. We don't know what number this table is, or this seat in the table is. We just know that we have a sequence. Okay, so the next rule I'm going to apply is O and I. What can O and I do? Okay, and O and I can do only 4 things. Okay, and then I'll just fill in my G and F. Okay, and that is all that can occur with O and I. And so I've got a total of 4 scenarios, and I've left with one rule, which is an exclusion rule, and it says H can't sit next to F, and H cannot sit next to K. So if I look at what H can do here, H can only do 2 things. H can sit here, or H can sit right here. All right, and then I just finish up with this. Okay, that's all that H can do. And then I can start here, and H can do 3 things. H can go here, it can go here, or H can go here. All right, now that's all H can do given if O and I is sitting there. And now I just move a little further, and H can do 3 things here. H can go here, H can go here, and H can go right here. All right? And then last one, H can do 2 things here. H can go here, and H can go right there. Okay, so I haven't gotten the entirety of what can occur with H, and I just need to ask myself what I'm left over with. I'm left with K, M, and P. And it's just a matter of figuring out what K, M, and P can actually do. Well, we know that H can't sit next to K, so you could only have an M and a P right here. All right, and so that leaves a K, M, P here and a K, M, P option here. Here, K can't go anywhere, so K would have to go here. And then we're just looking at M, P, P, M. Here, again, is the same situation. K cannot go anywhere, so K cannot go next to H, so it's forced to be in one spot, and that's all that can happen here. Here is just a situation where we can have K and P do whatever we want it to do. I'll express it right here, so then I can fill in the variables in the event that I am asked a question. K cannot go here, so I'd have M and P here. Then I'd have K, M, P, and K, M, P. Let's look at this one. K cannot go here, so I have a K here, and I have an M, P, or a P, M. This one, K cannot go here, so I have an MP, and then I have a KMP, KMP option to go here. And what I'll do is when I'm asked a question, if it said, for example, P goes here, I'll underline it and then tell myself, and then give myself a note as to what else can happen. Let's look at this one. Let's see, this is just another one of these. Let me put it over here. K and P can do anything. Okay. This is akin to this one. Okay, and then now we have a K here and an M, P, P, M option here. And then here we have an MP option and a K, M, P, K, M, P. And we've intuitively solved the analytical game. We know all of the options that can occur, and it's just a matter of going through and answer the questions. Okay, which one of the following could be the order in which 4 of the people are seated, with no one else seated between them, counting clockwise around the table? A says G, P, K, and F. Okay, if we look at the rule F, the first rule is F sits directly across from G. And the rule says that F and G have to have at least 3 spaces, or must have exactly 3 spaces in between them. If you look at A, F and G only have 2 spaces in between them, so A would fall out. Now if you look at B, B still has to do with the first rule as well as the setup. You see no F or G there, okay? That means we have a group of 4 without an F or G. That simply cannot happen. I mean, no matter which way we count 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll have an F. 1, 2, 3, 4, you'd have a G. So B automatically should fall out. Now, if we look at the second rule, H can't sit next to F or K. If you look at E, H is sitting next to K, so E would fall out. We're left with merely C and D as the answer choices. And then this one, O, we have the I being clockwise from O. And if you look at D, M is clockwise from O, so D falls out, and the answer to the question thus is C. Okay, 19. If H and O each sit immediately next to G, which one of the following could be the 2 people, each of whom sits immediately next to Peter? Okay, well, this is the only scenario we have right here where we have this H and O sitting in between G. Okay, now, what it asks us is who can sit immediately next, who can Peter be sandwiched in between? And when you're asked a question like that, before you start, because when you read this, it's somewhat difficult to see exactly what can happen. You just need to see if the 2 variables they give you, if they can even be in between anything. If there's exactly one spot that can be between them, that's what you need to look at. That's what you need to focus on. You can eliminate almost every answer choice because there is no one spot between them. There's typically more. So let's look at F and K. All right, if you look at F and K, they cannot have a space between them. All right, so that falls out immediately. B, F, and O, see there's two spaces between F and O, so that would fall out. C, H, and I, again, there's two spaces in between, so that wouldn't work. H and K. All right, well, look, H and K could have a space in between them, and they could have Peter in the middle of that. So that's the answer to the question. It's D. And then let's look at E, though. K and M. Well, K and M could have a space between them here, and that would only make F go between. Okay? All right, so again, we know that the answer to the question is D. Okay, so let's look at 20. If G does not sit immediately next to H, then which one of the following could be the two people, each of whom sits immediately next to Manuel? So we have to look at our scenarios here. So G doesn't sit next to H here. Okay? G doesn't sit next to H here. G doesn't sit next to H here. And G doesn't sit next to H right here. Okay, so it's important when you're working this game that you have check marks, you know, to understand the scenarios that you're looking at. The drawback to the circular game is that unlike a sequence setup, you know, you have to be on your toes when you're looking at this thing, or you can easily get confused as to what you're looking at. Okay, so who can be sandwiched in between M? Okay, well, if we look at A, F and H, it can happen right here. F and H, M can be sandwiched between F and H. In our very first scenario, that's the answer to the question. It's A. Let's look at B, though. What can happen between F and P? Okay, now, if you look at this setup, the only difference in these two setups is the OIK situation. All right, so they're going to be very analogous to each other. And these two that we're looking at is just the OIK situation on these. And basically these are just the inverses of one another. See, O and I is on the left side, and then O and I is on the right side on this. So when we look at one, we're pretty much looking at all of them. Okay, so let's look at F and P. F and P could have two spaces or no spaces, so they could never sandwich anything. And it's no spaces or two spaces in the same in this one as well. So they're wholly analogous with regard to F and P. All of the scenarios are. Okay, let's look at G and K, though. G and K have two spots between them, no spots between them, no spots between them, two spots between them. So they could never have anything sandwiched in between them. Let's look at G and P. Either no spots or two spots, no spots or two spots, no spots, two spots, no spots, two spots. So they could never have anything sandwiched between them. And then the last one, H and P. No spots, no spots, no spots, and no spots. No matter what happens, H and P wouldn't have anything in between them. So the answer to the question we know for a fact is A. All right. (21) If Manuel sits immediately next to O, then which one of the following people must sit immediately next to F? Okay. Well, if we look at this template, 4, M could sit immediately next to O. So this definitely works. And then if we look at this template, or scenario, M could immediately sit next to O. So that works. So we have to ask ourselves, who has to sit next to F? Okay, well, if you look at this, we have sort of kind of a chain reaction thing occur here. If M has to sit here, we only can choose between M and P, so P would have to sit here. And if M and P are used, that forces K to sit there. And the same thing happens here. We have an M and P situation. We have a P to sit here, and that forces K to sit here. So in both of our scenarios, who's forced to sit next to F? It's K and M, okay, and K and I, which means that K must sit next to F, where M and O sit next to one another. And hence our answer to the question is C. Okay. All right, 22. What is the minimum possible number of people sitting between I and M, counting clockwise from Ingrid around the table? So we're looking for a situation that tells us, I, M. All right, and if we can find it consecutively, we'll be great. And we have it right here in scenario 1. I and M there are no spaces in between them, so the answer to the question is A, which is 0. Okay, 23. If K sits directly across from I, then each of the following people could sit immediately next to O except. So we need to find where K and I are sitting directly across from one another, and it can happen right here. All right, and so what I'm going to do is, because you need to kind of know what's happening here, so you'd have to fill this in just a little bit. This is what we've got here. We can kind of put a circle around it to let ourselves know that that doesn't have to be. But actually, I need K and I to sit directly across from one another. So I have this. Okay. So I definitely have that. Okay, and then here I have K and I sitting next to one another here. So this just ends up being M and P, or P and M right here. I have K right there. And then this 10th scenario too, I have K here with M and P and M. All right, and so again, this doesn't have to happen. Okay. All right, so so basically, who can sit next to Olivia here? And let's just go through and make a list here. On 10, we have O can sit next to F and I. And here, O can sit next to K, M, and P and I. Okay, and then on this one, O can sit next to H. All right, so that's F, I, K, M, P, H. The only variable that we don't have there is G. And the answer to that question, thus, is B. Okay. Okay, let's look at 24. If K sits directly across from H, then what is the minimum possible number of people sitting between G and K, counting clockwise from G to K? Okay, so I need a situation where K sits next to H. So I have it here, okay, and because we're on the last question, I'm just going to show this a little bit better than I normally would. So here I have this one, and K could sit directly next to H on this one. K could sit directly next to H on this. And then also K could sit directly next to H right here. All right, so I'm looking at this one, this one, this one, and this one. And so it asked me, what is the minimum number of spots that could happen between G and K if I count clockwise from G to K? So again, I'm looking for something like this. Okay? And if we look at this one, there are two people in between G and K. All right, so I've got 2 here. If I look at 3, I have 4 people. So 2 is so far my best number. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4 people here. And then on 10, I have 1, 2 people. Okay? So thus, I know that the answer to the question is C, which is 2 people. Okay, that concludes Analytical Game 4, and that's LSAT 41. Thanks.